daily living. But please welcome Kate Laver. Associate Professor Kate Laver is an occupational therapist and ARC Discovery Fellow at Flinders University. She co-edited our book on rehabilitation for people with dementia, and she's going to talk about activities of daily living and rehab. Go ahead, Kate.
Thanks, Laver. Kate Swaffer is a very hard act to follow. I've had the experience of speaking after her a number of times. And
I'm checking, is it working through your headphones?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, I think we might need someone to mute in the background. But I'm always shaking in my boots because she gives very compelling and powerful presentations, and it's a hard act to follow. I'd just like to start by acknowledging Kathy Pearsall and Rachel Wiley, who helped me develop some of the content both for the book and for this particular presentation. And I think, when we talk about activities of daily living in people with dementia and rehabilitation, we are going back to a medical model. Unfortunately, a lot of dementia care services still fit under a medical model. And I think we have a long way to go, and I really aspire to Kate Swaffer's model of acknowledging dementia as a disability and rehabilitation for those disabilities. I think in the interim, there's a lot that we need to do to work on the basics, because this seems like the basics, and in a lot of the case, it's not happening in practice, and I think we have a long way to go in this area as well. So I just wanted to start by showing that we can see here that this graph just shows us that firstly, dementia impacts us in a number of different domains. So we can see here there's a decline in memory complaints over time, there's a decline in scores on the mini-mental, in instrumental activities of daily living, which is more things like household tasks, community participation type tasks, as well as more basic activities of daily living, which is more things like showering, dressing and grooming. But interestingly, these graphs show us that the time of dementia diagnosis is the black line, the vertical line, and we can see that there's a decline in all of these domains leading up until the diagnosis. So, we talk about early intervention, and it really needs to happen from the time of diagnosis. We can see that there's some variability in the rate of decline in the symptoms, and that depends partly on the type of dementia, the presence of apathy. So those that are diagnosed with apathy tend to have a more rapid decline. Those that are older also tend to experience a more rapid decline, and educational attainment, with lower levels of educational attainment associated with a more rapid decline in function. Really, a lot of the theoretical underpinning comes from, as an occupational therapist, we really know that humans have a need to do. And we talk about excess disability. So when someone begins to experience the symptoms of dementia, we see that there starts to become a reduction in their physical and cognitive ability. What unfortunately can happen is well-meaning friends and family can take over some of those usual roles which are performed, and these usual roles of the person with dementia can be performed by others with all the best intentions. Unfortunately, that leads to this cycle of reduced engagement activities and then potentially a further reduction in physical and cognitive abilities. We also know from Maslow's hierarchy of needs that our very basic needs form the foundation, our physiological needs, our safety needs for security and safety, but we also have psychological and self-fulfillment needs. And so to be able to fulfill our needs, we do need to have this feeling of accomplishment, which is associated with being independent and maintaining our own usual life roles. So for example, Ted lives alone, he has mild dementia, he begins having difficulty preparing meals. A dependency approach would be that we would think, let's look after Ted, let's do the best thing that we can, let's organise him a meal delivery service so he doesn't have to worry about meals and he has good nutrition. A rehabilitation approach would be different to that. So the rehabilitation approach would involve organising a meal delivery, involving family or friends in the work, supporting him to shop and store food items safely, developing a routine meal plan, developing a complementary shopping list to support the meal plan, developing a booklet of simple recipes, labelling items, and some safety mechanisms. So there's a number of different things that we can do to support Ted to continue to cook. When we assess activities of daily living in people with dementia, I won't dwell on this too much. There's a number of tools. We don't think that any of these are necessarily better than others, but they do measure different aspects of activities of daily living functions. So we might match the tool to our particular population. When we look at the best intervention for activities of daily living, so we conducted this, it's a systematic review of systematic reviews, which was published in 2016. And the outcome of interest here is activities of daily living function, so independence in activities. And we plotted the evidence for a number of different non-pharmacological approaches. And we can see that the most effective things that we can do to maintain independence and delay decline are exercise and physical activity and dyadic interventions. And we can see that because the little the blue diamond is to the right of that vertical dotted line. So what are dyadic interventions? In dyadic interventions, we're working with the person and their care partners in collaboration. We're prioritising rehabilitation goals, and the person with dementia and care partner is identifying the priorities. We're focusing on the person's strengths and capabilities. And then we use our intervention strategies of task or activity adaptation, environmental modification, and simplifying communication. When we look at the evidence for dyadic interventions, we know that most of these have been tested in the community with people with mild to moderate symptoms of dementia. We believe that rehabilitation of activities of daily living can be effective in residential care. There just haven't been the studies really to test high quality randomised controlled trials to give us definitive evidence about which approach we should use and with which population in residential care. When we look at the effective interventions, we actually see that most of these require multiple consultations. So these kind of things take work, and most of them require 5 to 10 consultations with a health professional. And we also know that people's strengths and capabilities and symptoms and care challenges change over time. So we might need to offer these types of interventions at different time points. Some examples of how we might adapt an activity. Jane lives with her daughter. She has difficulty dressing herself independently. So our dependency approach would be for her daughter to help Jane get dressed or to dress Jane. A rehabilitation approach would be to talk to her daughter about why it's important that she does as much as she can for herself and stays independent. That Jane's daughter would place out the required items for dressing. She might limit the choices involved in dressing. They would use a routine, so getting dressed at the same place, same time, and they would perform one aspect of dressing at a time. A practical example of how we might modify the environment to make it conducive to rehabilitation. So John likes having his neighbour over for a chat and preparing him a cup of tea. If John begins to find this difficult, or the neighbour is worried that John is struggling with this activity, a few things that we might do to modify the environment are only have the things that would be needed out on the bench, removing excess clutter, reducing any other distractions, so noise or other things that were distracting to the task, sitting in a comfortable environment and focusing on making the tea and then chat rather than that dual tasking and trying to do both things at the same time. And in conclusion, I think, that this type of approach is a lot easier in 2020. We have a whole heap of devices which can help ourselves to be more independent and are particularly beneficial for people who might live alone and might not have family living with them. And so we really need to progress dementia care and take use of these assistive devices which can help people stay at home for longer. Thanks, Laver.
I guess in response to Kate Swaffer's comment about rehabilitation, about living a good life, I meant to mention that not presenting tonight, but in the book is a chapter on dementia and employment, and a chapter on rehabilitation and leisure activities and supporting people in those hobbies and things that are important in living a good life.